Today, slavery is a blight in our world. There are children all around the world that are enslaved every day. There are women, there are men that are taken and controlled by someone else. The estimates are somewhere between 12 and 27 million slaves in the world. It's kind of hard to get an accurate count. It's not something that a lot of companies promote or that you list in your brochures. But it's going on. Tracy was mentioning to me that in India, there are sections where children are kidnapped. And they're used to work in carpet factories. And they're just gone. Parents don't know where they're at. They're just gone. And I was looking at some statistics. And, one said that 200 years ago, the slave would be worth the equivalent of about $40,000 today. Today, in parts of the world, you can buy a slave for $90. I don't want to make light of slavery. I don't want to make light of this plight. I mean, who would choose to be a slave? And yet, so many of us do that to ourselves. America, we just live a lifestyle that we obligate ourselves to someone else. We are in someone else's control on a regular basis. Who do you work for? And you might name a company. You might work for yourself. You might think that. But how many of you are really working for Visa and for MasterCard and Discover Card? Because of the way that you live, you can't afford not to go to work. You can't afford to be sick. You can't afford to think about changing jobs because you have obligations. And maybe it's not a credit card. Maybe you're working for Ford Motor Company or for Toyota or Mercedes-Benz. And you've obligated yourself because now you've got a payment every month that comes. And you can't afford not to make that payment. Maybe you work for Wells Fargo and Countrywide and these mortgage companies because you have a house that you're trying to pay for. And you have obligated yourself to someone else. You can't afford not to work. Because you stop working and they'll come and they'll take your stuff away. And maybe it's not credit or debt. And maybe it's, you've got your bills under control and you're paying everything, but it's just your lifestyle. The way that you're living, the clothes that you're buying, the food that you're eating out, and all the different things that you want to do. You think, we can't live without that. So you have to work, and maybe you have to work overtime, and maybe your wife has to work, or your spouse has to work, and all of this, we are obligating ourselves to serve someone else. All these things that we think about. No money down. No interest for 60 months. We end up getting a car that we can't afford, or furniture that we don't really need. But it was such a good deal. All those impulse items by the checkout counters as you walk through the grocery stores in Walmart. You didn't even really know you needed batteries, but there they are. And they end up in your cart. And there's gum, and there's candy, and you just pick it up. That's what it's meant for. That's why it's there. We don't think how we're going to pay for that. Sometimes you just swipe the card and you go on. And you end up paying for that candy bar for 4 years. Because you're just making the minimum payment every month. Tracy went shopping for a mattress. This is several years ago. She had one picked out. She's ready to check out. And she was going to put it on credit. They had the terms at the store, and the guy ran her credit, and he said he wanted to start selling her a mattress all over again. Because you can get a really nice mattress. You don't have to get this one. This one's not expensive enough for you. You got a good credit score. So let's take advantage of that. Let's run this up a little bit. And we all do it. It's kind of infiltrated our lives. I had a Christian college uphold my financial aid one year. I was waiting for the money to come in, and it didn't come in. I checked, and it wasn't there. And I checked my account, and I checked the mailbox, and the check wasn't coming. And I needed this money, and it wasn't there. And so finally I went back to the financial aid department, and I said, "What's the deal?" They said, "We didn't process your loan." Why not? Don't you realize you can borrow a whole lot more? We didn't think you were serious. You just put a little amount down. We want to encourage you to borrow some more. So don't you realize I have to pay this back? That's all I need. That's all I want. I had friends get out of college and they couldn't take a ministry position because they couldn't afford to pay their bills. The churches weren't paying them enough to take care of their debt, their student loans. We obligate ourselves to others, and that dictates how we live. We get coupons, super double coupons, triple coupons. We get 9-year supply of toilet paper because it was a good deal. My grandmother used to have a pantry down in her cellar, and when Tracy and I were first married, we would go over and visit my grandparents, and as we were leaving, they would say, "Here, take some food with you." And, we were just starting out, and they wanted to kind of help take care of us, and they would start loading grocery bags up for us. And that was great for us. It's a whole lot cheaper than going to the grocery store. And she would load us up, and she'd try to, "Here, take some more stuff. Grandma, don't you want that soup?" "Oh, no, I'm not going to eat that." "What do you mean you're not going to eat that?" "I don't like that soup." "Why'd you buy it?" "It was such a great deal." We do this all the time. Buying things that we don't need because it's a good deal. And then we become obligated. We live with the continual car payment because the other one's getting too old. We move into bigger and bigger houses because the other one is too small. We go to nicer and nicer restaurants because, that's what we deserve. And I'm a good person. And each time we obligate ourselves to someone else. What is it that you want? We talk about, what do you need versus what do you want? And sometimes we get those confused. Well, I need food, and I need shelter, and I need clothes. Those are kind of the necessities, right? And then I need cable, and I need an internet connection, and I need a better car, and I need more of this, and I need more of that. What do you want? Well, that's the answer, isn't it? I want more. There was a study years ago that said, how much is enough to live on? And they figured out the answer was about 20% more than you're currently making. There wasn't just a number, right? There's not just a number of this is how much I need to live on. No matter who was answering, it was about 20% more. If I had about 20% more, I would be comfortable. But the people that get the 20% more, what do they need? 20% more than that. And then they would be comfortable. And so we get confused about our life. And we get confused about our money and our possessions and our wealth and our stuff. Proverbs 22:7, the second half of it. The borrower is the slave of the lender. Think about that. The borrower is the slave of the lender. When we have financial obligations to someone else, it dictates what we're able to do. It dictates how much we have to work. It dictates our schedule. It dictates our way of life. When we overextend ourselves, we have to cut back in some other areas. Or we get ourselves deeper and deeper in debt and then have to declare bankruptcy, and then that just causes all more problems. The borrower is the slave of the lender. We obligate ourselves to someone else when we go in debt. Last week, I mentioned Lot as one of the examples. Abraham and Lot are doing very well. And their families can't get along with each other because they have so much. And so Abraham says, you go one way, I'll go the other way, I'll give you first pick. And Lot looks and he sees the valley, he sees the grass, he sees all the opportunities there. And he says, I'll take that. And in choosing what he thought was the better, he gets himself into a situation where he draws closer and closer to sin until he's lost. And it messes up him, and it messes up his family, it messes up his children, it messes up the people around him. All because of his choices. Our choices have impact on us, on our families, on our children, on the people around us. When we are unwise with our money, it creates problems in our life. So what do we do? One of the things we do is we need to be learning contentment. Philippians chapter 4. Kind of a popular verse. Right? I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And when we take that out of context, we start thinking about, I can be president of the United States because I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I can win the lottery because I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I may not even have to buy a ticket. That's not what Paul's talking about there. He said, I've learned the secret. I learned the secret of having a lot. I learned the secret of having a little. I can deal with either of those situations because I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. If I'm wealthy, praise be to God. If I'm poor, still praise be to God. Because I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. In Romans, Paul calls himself a servant, a slave of Christ. We can choose to be a slave. But choose your master carefully. In chapter 6 of Romans, verse 16, Paul says, "Don't you know then that when you offer yourselves to someone as obedient slaves, you are slaves to the one you obey, whether you are slaves to sin, which leads to death, or to obedience, which leads to righteousness." In verse 18, "You have been set free from sin and have become slaves to righteousness." George Mueller was a 19th century Christian. He ran orphanages in London, England. But that's not what he wanted to do. He wanted to be a missionary for God. He wanted to travel. He wanted to go to foreign places and to preach the gospel. And yet, he was stuck in London running these orphanages. And his story is really kind of amazing. That he didn't go out and do fundraising. He didn't go out and have pledge drives. And he didn't go solicit donations. When he had a need, he took that need to God. And his story is an amazing story of how each of those needs is met by God. Maybe sometimes not when George would want it answered. A lot of times it was just, right at the last minute when they're desperate and they have no other means and they don't know what to do. But he took care of thousands and thousands of orphans through this means. And it felt like it wasn't good enough. Because this isn't what he wanted to be doing for God. But he took God's blessing. And he was obedient to God. He was faithful to God. He didn't like where God was leading him. But he learned to trust God, to rely on God, and he went where God was sending him. And finally, when he was 70 years old, he went on his first missionary trip. He was a missionary for 17 more years after that. He finally got his wish, following God. By now, hopefully you've finished your taxes. Unless you filed Form 4868 and received the 6-month extension. We're going to pass out some sheets here. This is an income and expense sheet. So this is your assignment for this week. Probably just like one for family is a good number there. I want you to examine your finances. What did you do with your money? And this is a monthly statement. What did you do with your money last month? What are you doing with your money this coming month? How much of it is already spoken for before you even begin? To whom are you a slave? To whom have you obligated yourself or indebted yourself? And what can we do to start getting ourselves free from these obligations. Paul said we get to have a choice of who we serve. What is your choice going to be? Are you going to choose to serve yourself? Are you going to choose to serve a company or someone else? Are you going to choose to serve your debt, your obligation? Or are you going to choose to serve God? Most of us here have already made that choice. Most of us have already decided, I'm going to follow God. Now, for us, does your balance sheet reflect that? Are you in such a position that you can really serve God in what you do? Or have you obligated yourself to someone else? If you do, you need to free yourself from that obligation so that you can truly serve God. Some of you haven't made that decision yet, that you're going to follow God. You can make that decision this morning too. You can choose God. You can choose to follow Him, to be His child, to be His disciple. The choice is yours.